local conditions, laws, and regulations. This information is critical if foreign commercial ventures are to succeed. The role of the lawyers and CPAs in international transactions goes beyond giving legal and accounting advice. Commonly, the advice given by the lawyers and accountants relates to foreign business and investment matters. Locating, selecting, and working with foreign professionals can be difficult and challenging. There are many differences between countries' substantive and procedural law, the organization of the professions, and cultural mores and social customs. Oftentimes, the differences are not apparent, making it easy to make basic mistakes. Little practical guidance is available. The common law traditions of the United States and Canada are much different than the civil law traditions of Mexico and the countries of Central and South America. Also, it is important that professionals that are engaged either speak the language of the foreign country in which a business is being conducted or have access to quality translation services. These are not necessarily easy to obtain. One of the best ways to locate qualified and suitable foreign professionals is by personal recommendations from other companies experienced in international business or governmental agencies in your home country. When these are not satisfactory, there are many professional directories and listings that may be consulted. A logical starting place for the search for foreign professional assistance is to consult with professional organizations in your home country. Also, accounting and law firms in your country may have experience with counterparts in other countries, and they could serve as a source of referrals. Another resource for referrals is your own local business community. Your local chamber of commerce and or industrial chamber may be able to supply a list of members who engage in foreign business. They may also have a list of professionals who support international business. Also, colleges and universities in your countries have professors and trainers who will have had contact with foreign lawyers and accountants through academic or extension program relationships, such as the ones available here at San Diego State University's International Training Center. Finally, recommendations can be obtained from governmental officials in the embassy of the country in which the business is to be conducted. Particularly, government officials working in the federal, commerce, state, transportation, and development or import-export banking areas would be likely to know professionals or organizations that could recommend them and serve as an invaluable resource. International joint ventures and technology or knowledge transfer are certainly strategic resources for any product or service organization seeking to move ahead successfully and survive this difficult era of globalization of our national economies. Governmental agencies, schools, universities, and private enterprise are all being challenged to increase our competitiveness. I hope the information and concepts I have briefly presented to you today will help guide you in your efforts to take advantage of these exciting new opportunities for international business and joint benefits resulting from the growing interdependence and strategic alliances of our communities worldwide. I hope all of you will give it serious consideration. If not now, certainly in the very near future, we will all be confronted with this new window to our global community. You'll be surprised at the rewards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Let us begin the second question and answer session. And first off, we have a fax from Universidad Iberoamericana in Tijuana, and that is, what is the methodology for the globalization of an organization? How do you do it?
Well, that's a very broad question, but I would respond this way. Identify products and services. Research needs of your consumers or your customer. Become introspective. Look within yourself and say, what advantages do I have in the marketplace or in my organization that my competitors do not have? And then finally, look at your competitors, because most alliances, most joint ventures take place, in fact, practically all of them take place between competitors. And it's a case of joining together with your competitors. So it's like it is a marriage situation. And who do you want to become married with? Those are the first initial steps that you should take.
Would you care to respond, or shall we move ahead?
The only thing that I would add is due diligence is of key importance, understanding who you're dealing with. doing a thorough, in-depth investigation of qualified partners and finding out about them before you enter into a venture, I think, is key.
Thank you. Next, we have a live call from Unión Industrial de Paraguay in Asunción. What is your question, please?
Good afternoon. We're calling you from Paraguay, from the Industrial Union of Paraguay, Asunción. My name is Hugo Cardoso, and do you encourage free competition, which also perhaps encourage protectionism, or do you think it reduces protectionism?
My answer is based on my own views and my own feelings. I am anti-protectionist. I believe in the free flow of goods and services across what we call today national borders. Naturally, we have to look to ourselves and look to our own populations and our own families for protection from people who would come in and do practices that would be illegal and restrain our ability to do trade. But generally, I am not in favor of protectionism, and perhaps we're getting into a legal area now again, so Mr. Gonzalez would have something to say.
Thank you, Stan. The trend in the negotiations of all these trade agreements is against protectionism, and it is to encourage foreign investment, open up trade between countries, and that goes against the notion of protectionism. The foreign investment laws are being liberalized to encourage foreign investment, to allow foreign companies to control or to have at least an equal interest and participation in management of enterprises they participate in. And the lowering of trade barriers is causing a lessening of the ability to be as protectionist as historically has been the case in many countries.
Thank you. Next, we have another fax, and this one is from our colleagues here in the United States from the World Trade Center who are participating in our program for the very first time this morning, and welcome. The question has to do with intellectual property rights and the fact that we have these agreements in place here in the United States, and how can they be enforced, and what is the situation in Mexico and the rest of the hemisphere?
Well, as part of the NAFTA implementation process, Mexico enacted a new industrial property law last year, and it does contain provisions and procedures for enforcement. There are criminal sanctions that are contained in the law for violation of the law. And the enforcement mechanisms and agencies to do that are in the process of being organized. I think that there seems to be a tendency to, by companies, especially U.S. companies, to expect instant gratification in the implementation of these new laws and mechanisms that are being put in place as part of the NAFTA implementation process. These things don't happen overnight. They don't happen in the intellectual property protections area overnight, neither in the environmental area, where there are also great changes that are being undertaken in Mexico today.
We have a live call now from Comisión Federal de Electricidad in México. Escuchamos.
Bueno.
Right now, 25% of our productive sector in our country is out of a job. What strategies would you propose for a country who is in an inflationary process and recession process in order for us to become productive again?
George?
That is a problem that is, I shouldn't say problem, it's a question that is multi-dimensional, and it's in many ways like the immigration question that we talked about before. There are so many elements and so many factors that enter into the answer to that question that I would hesitate to try to tackle it right now. I don't believe that I'm really qualified to talk about the economic factors that are impacting the economy in Mexico and the employment picture there. If we could take some more time and respond to that question in writing, I would feel a lot more comfortable.
Let me remind you, as the audience, that we do respond to every phone call and fax that we get. Obviously, we're not able to handle all of them on the air, but we try to provide a reasonable response to all of your questions. Our next fax is from Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá and has to do with the following issue. And it's for Mr. Schultz, and that is, what areas of the world offer the greatest business opportunities for Central American organizations?
I would say the United States, with the labor pool that is available in Central and South America, with the resources, the natural resources that are available. We're a country of great consumption of products and services. But that does not mean that our neighbors to the south of us should not look toward each other and to each other. But I would say the immediate answer that comes to mind is the United States.
I think South American countries and businesses in South America, or Central America, excuse me, should look both north and south. I think South America contains vast markets. And the similarities in the systems and the laws that Central America has with South America give it great advantages. And in addition, the new trade agreements that are being negotiated and those that have been signed give Central American countries greater access to the markets in South America. However, I agree with Stan as well in that the U.S. markets would offer great opportunities as well.
Incidentally, excuse me, I don't mean to ignore our neighbor to the north, Canada. That is also an excellent marketplace for those people in Central and South America.
Good point. Our next live call is from Instituto Tecnológico de Tijuana in Baja California. May we have your question?
Digo, pero aquí es Tepic. Es el Instituto Tecnológico de Tepic.
Tepic.
Sí, bueno, sí, mi pregunta es...
My question is, how do you think that the agricultural activity may have been impacted as a result of this globalization movement? How does the globalization movement impact agriculture in Mexico?
Well, I've read recently about some adverse effects this has had, and again, we're not in a perfect world, we're not in a perfect society, and I've heard that the corn growers in Mexico have been adversely affected by an infusion of corn from the United States, and that, of course, is something that has to be addressed. I think that, on the other hand, there is a tremendous market in the United States for agricultural products and seafood products from Mexico, as there always has been, and I think that will increase. So it's, again, two sides of a coin. I think there will be good effects, and I think there will be bad effects, and I think it's a case of working them out to everyone's mutual satisfaction.
We have now a fax from Universidad de Guadalajara, and it has to do with environmental standards, new environmental standards under NAFTA. And have either of you, perhaps particularly you, Mr. Gonzalez, had any experience with these new practices?
Yes. There are a great many standards, normas oficiales, that are being published by the Mexican government almost on a weekly basis in the environmental area. There has been a large question that's been looming of enforcement, and I think that the Mexican government is working very hard to build its auditing and enforcement staffs, and once a reorganization of the agencies is put into place, I think that the enforcement concentration and effort will once again be put into play. There have been a great many more audits in the last year than there were prior to that. The staffs have been increased greatly, and we see enforcement as a continued area of concentration of the agencies.
I would add something very briefly. I have a personal experience having had an interest in a fiberglass facility in Mexico, and attention to environmental standards is extremely important in the production of fiberglass products because of the possibility of pollution of the atmosphere. And there are many people on this side of the border who believe that Mexico did not have laws to protect pollution and against pollution, and this is not true, and it gets back to what George just said. The laws are there, it's a case of enforcing the laws, and that is what we're seeing more and more of for the benefit of everyone concerned.
Very well. Our next fax is from Universidad de Costa Rica, and it has to do with the extent and nature of what might be desirable for employee participation, profit sharing, these kinds of interactive activities within an organization as it seeks to globalize.
Well, my personal belief and my experience is that if you give a worker an opportunity to share in the growth of a company by somehow remunerating him and giving him an opportunity to have partial ownership in the company, that you'll get the highest amount of performance. Nothing spurs an employee on more than when he knows that he has an expression we use here, a piece of the action. And so I'm very much in favor of that. And of course we have programs here that go all the way up through ESOP, and where employees actually can take over and own a company at a certain point in time.
I think that the labor law in Mexico probably has more comprehensive protections contained in it for the worker than just about any place else that I'm aware of. The labor law is really extensive, and there are any number of benefits that an employee is entitled to by law, not just through contract negotiations that a union may have engaged in with employers. So if you compare the laws in Latin America as regards to the protection of employees, I think you'll find that the protections contained in the law are probably much greater than what you have even in the United States.
Our next live question is from Universidad Tecnológica de Tula-Tepeji. What is your question, please?
Sí, habla el ingeniero. Sí.
Hable muy bien.
Bueno, habla el ingeniero Roque Ruiz López.
Muy bien.
Universidad Tecnológica de Tula-Tepeji.
Adelante la
La
pregunta.
pregunta es,
The question is if an organized enterprise is faced with a bad competition, what should they do if they find the unloyal competition, the disloyal competition?
Well, again, I'll respond briefly, and again, this gets a little bit into the legal area. It depends on the contractual agreements. Generally, they contain provisions for disputes and settlement of grievances between companies. But if you have a bad marriage, you terminate it, and if you have a bad and you provide for that, and the laws can provide for that. The stronger the original organization that's established is, the more difficult, you might say, it is to break off a relationship. In mergers and acquisitions, you have irrevocable agreements, and I'm getting a little bit into George's area here, but on the other hand, you have more commitment. So perhaps you'll respond more, George.
I think the gentleman may be referring more to unfair competition. I think he may be talking about unfair competition from foreign companies that may be importing unfair prices, products into a market. There we have protections contained in these trade agreements in terms of countervailing duties that can be applied against that type of unfair competition. There are antitrust laws that most countries have that have remedies in them for unfair competition and for combinations of businesses trying to keep others out of a marketplace unfairly. I sense that that's what the gentleman is talking about.
Thank you. Our next question is from Petróleos Mexicanos in Villahermosa, Tabasco. And may we ask that you keep this question quite brief. Thank you.
The question is for Mr. Gonzalez, who has mentioned the existence of some special aspects within the NAFTA in order to correct certain imbalances, particularly in Mexico in the labor market because of the reorientation of production through to exports, the export sector. What do you think we should do to correct those imbalances that are affecting Mexico?
Well, the NAFTA does provide for certain safety mechanisms for areas, industrial areas or manufacturing areas that are adversely affected by a flood of competition from the exterior. Those safety mechanisms can be called into place by the government, and if the other parties, the other governments don't respond, then the ultimate sanction is that the country that is not responding no longer may take the benefit of what NAFTA affords to it. Those are mechanisms that have to be put into play through the procedures contained in the agreements themselves and their governmental arrangements through the contract.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for your excellent questions. But we're now running out of time for this session. We hope that you have enjoyed your time with us, and it has been my pleasure to serve as your moderator. And we hope that this video conference has addressed at least some of the issues of importance to you. Thank you so much for your participation, and we want to thank our expert presenters and commentators, Mr. Schultz, Mr. Gonzalez. We want to thank them for providing so much useful information and insight today. Both of you have given us a very clear sense of what might be involved as we pursue strategies of globalization, joint ventures, and sensible collaborative efforts to achieve common goals. I think that it is clear from today's discussion and from hundreds of others that take place on a very real level between and among us every business day that there is a tremendous potential for the effective use of the resources we share in common. In the end, that will be our collective strength in the new world of regional and global economic development efforts. Thank you very much again. Gracias. Muchas felicidades y hasta pronto.
Thank you.